All right, we are going to finish chapter 13. This is the second part of chapter 13, and this will be the conclusion of the story, The Mouse and the Motorcycle. So, um, where we left off, the Keith had offered for Ralph to come with him, and then he said, he could keep him in a cage, and Ralph thought that didn't sound like such a great idea, being in a cage all the time. But he was excited to maybe have the motorcycle to ride. So he was trying to think about it, but then Keith has offered for Ralph to keep the motorcycle there at the hotel, but Ralph is wondering where he would hide the motorcycle. So when we last left off, he said something about he knew he couldn't hide it behind the curtain forever because every year after Labor Day, when the busy season was done, they took the curtains down and they would clean them. And then, of course, at that point, they would find the motorcycle. So that's where we just left off. That is a problem, agreed Keith. There must be some place in a big hotel like this where you could keep a motorcycle. Ralph sat on the motorcycle thinking as hard as he could. In the closet? He couldn't get it out. When the door was closed, under the bed? Eventually it would be found. How about downstairs? Suggested Keith. I could carry it down for you and before we leave. There must be a good hiding place down there someplace. There's that big old clock my ancestor ran up, said Ralph thoughtfully. Nobody ever cleans under it, but frankly, I don't care to have it striking over my head. He thought a while. How about that big television set in the lobby? He asked. The noise shouldn't bother you because you would only go under it at night when everyone was asleep. Yes, Ralph was excited. That's a perfect garage. I saw it when I got the aspirin. The legs are just high enough for the motorcycle, but not quite high enough for a vacuum cleaner attachment. Then it's settled, said Keith, and then added rather sternly, Ralph thought, but first you must ask your mother. Ralph dismounted and ran to the knothole. He was gone several minutes before he returned to announce in triumph, she says I can keep the motorcycle if I promise to drive it carefully and wear my crash helmet every single time I ride it. Swell. Keith was just as excited as Ralph. When we check out, I'll hide it for you while my folks are busy paying the bill. I can't thank you enough. Ralph fastened his crash helmet once more. I never thought I would have a motorcycle of my very own. Keith lay back on the pillow and smiled at the mouse mounting the motorcycle. It will be fun thinking of you riding around that big old lobby when I'm back in Ohio this winter going to school. And when the teacher asks us to write a composition about our summer vacation, I can write about meeting a brave mouse named Ralph, who rode a little motorcycle. So a composition is a story. So if his teacher asks him to write a composition about his summer, she's asking him to write a story about his summer. I'll tell about you bringing the aspirin, except I'll have to call it a pill because I can't spell aspirin. Of course, the teacher won't believe it, but she'll probably say I show imagination. Ralph felt proud to think he was going to be written about in a composition in far off Ohio. He grabbed his tail, gunned the motor, and took off, heading for the threadbare part of the carpet that made such a good speedway. Round and round he sped, faster and faster, until his whiskers blew back and he was filled with joy of speed. He longed to wave to Keith, but he realized a good driver must keep both hands on the hand grips. He glanced up and noticed that Keith's eyes were closed. The boy had fallen asleep with a smile on his face. Ralph dragged his heels to brake the motorcycle. Quietly, he parked it beside the bed, and quietly he removed his crash helmet and hid it behind the curtain. He did not want to disturb the sleeping boy. Ralph could wait. Ralph could wait to ride the motorcycle. It was his to keep. And here's a picture of Ralph standing next to the motorcycle. And there's his little crash helmet. All right. The end. Hope you enjoyed this book. I'm currently trying to decide what book we're going to read next. So I will let you guys know next week. I might do a couple short read alouds, picture books, and then we'll get started with another chapter book. Have a great weekend. Hope you enjoyed this story. It's one of my favorites.